Judge not, that you be not judged. Everyone I've ever met hears that as a moral instruction. Don't do this because it's wrong. Which means the moment you do it, you've committed a violation. Which means someone is keeping a record of your judging. Which means the instruction against judgment is itself a courtroom. Same menu. Now you're being judged for judging. Here's what that verse is actually pointing at. You cannot judge. Not because it's wrong to judge, but because you've never had enough information to do it accurately. And neither has anyone who has ever judged you. For a judgment to be accurate, it needs complete information. Complete means everything, not most things, not the visible things, not the behavior you observed in this moment, in this situation, on this day. Everything. Every cause that preceded the behavior. Every wound underneath the wound. Every history the person carried into the room before you arrived. Every frame the action exists inside of that you can't see from where you're standing. Nobody has that. Not about other people, not about situations, not about themselves. Perception is partial by definition. It sees from one angle, inside one story, filtered through one nervous system, shaped by one history of experience that the nervous system filed as evidence and generalized into pattern. Which means the courtroom, the confident verdict, the clear assessment, the certain knowledge of what happened and why and what it means and what it says about the person is built on something that doesn't exist. We have been running a courtroom on evidence that would be inadmissible if it was actually examined. And here's the part that makes it personal rather than philosophical. The verdict you are most certain about is the one most worth questioning. Certainty is not evidence of accuracy. Certainty is evidence that the story has been running long enough that the gaps stopped being visible. Here's what nobody notices in the half second. Every judgment is a two-verdict system running simultaneously. The moment I judge you as less than, I have immediately judged myself as greater than. Not later, not as a consequence that arrives eventually. Right now, in the same instant. The two verdicts are the same verdict. One just faces the other direction. There is no judgment of another that doesn't instantly create a corresponding judgment of self. You cannot place someone below you without placing yourself above them. You cannot find someone guilty without appointing yourself as judge. You cannot sentence someone without assuming the authority to do so. And the moment you assume the authority, you've also assumed the standard. The same measuring system that found the other person wanting will eventually turn on the one holding the measuring stick. This is what "judge not that you be not judged" is actually describing. Not a future punishment from an external authority. The immediate consequence of the judgment itself. The measuring system you just activated applies to everyone inside it, including you, right now. Here's why the simultaneous verdict isn't just an interesting observation about psychology. The judgment assumes separation. It requires two separate parties, the one judging and the one being judged, with separate identities, separate standings, separate stakes in the outcome. Without separation, the judgment has no structure to stand on. There is no above and below without distance between them. There is no guilty and not guilty without two separate people to assign the verdicts to. Which means the judgment was always self-referential. Not because of a moral principle about treating others as yourself, because the separation the judgment required was never real. If there is only one false belief expressing itself through two people who forgot they were looking in a mirror, which we've already established, then the judgment isn't one person evaluating another. It's the false belief evaluating itself and finding itself wanting. That's not ethics. That's ontology. Which means "judge not that you be not judged" isn't a warning about what will happen to you. It's a description of what is already happening. Every time. So if the judgment was never accurate, if the information was always incomplete, if the verdict was always self-referential, if the courtroom was built on a premise that was never real, what happens to every verdict that was ever issued against you? It was issued by someone who also didn't have enough information from inside the same incomplete perception, filtered through the same nervous system running the same pattern, which means the verdict that has been running your half-second, informing your story, shaping the menu you've been ordering from, was never accurate either. Not because the person who issued it was malicious, but because they couldn't see the whole, Nobody can. Cannot doesn't just limit your judgment of others. It dissolves the authority of every judgment that was ever issued against you. Not as a generous reframe, as what was always true. We cannot judge because we cannot. Not because it's wrong, but because perception has never been complete enough to do it accurately. And neither has the perception of anyone who has ever judged you. Sit with this. Next time, the need to be right is the courtroom's last disguise.